I talked a little bit about this, but I think it's a big part of the story here. College football, when you look at the athletes themselves, they are not necessarily any more in danger on campus than they would be elsewhere. And there's a talking point out there that I think it's important to acknowledge and consider and also reject from an argument perspective. And let me explain how that argument goes. The argument is out there, how in the world can you play college football when there are the coronavirus cases out there as they are, and these kids are under this much danger? What happens, this is an argument I don't believe, but this is the argument that you will hear some people say, what happens if some of those players get sick, and God forbid what happens if some get hospitalized, and God forbid what happens in a worst case scenario if some of them or any of them end up actually dying while they're playing college football. Okay, that is an argument that is out there that I would say the Corona Bros of the world will make, both in media and at large. When you actually unpack that argument, what you will see is there is not a lot of truth to it, and let me explain why. First of all, it's possible. It's not likely, but it's possible that some college-aged athletes, it hasn't happened yet, and we appear to be through the worst of the outbreak so far in terms of death. It's possible, though, that a college-aged athlete could die of the coronavirus. Again, it's not likely because young people in general, college-age kids, are not one of the likely targets of the coronavirus. It's possible that one of them could get sick and one of them could end up dying. Not likely again, but possible. But that's also possible, still not likely, but also possible if they aren't on a campus at all. In other words, I have not seen anyone point out that college athletes are under a greater risk factor on campus than they would be off campus. In fact, the data would seem to suggest, when you look at all of the medical treatment and all of the medical care that is available to these athletes, that they're actually safer on campus than they would be off campus. And let me explain why I believe that to be true. On campus, they are regularly being tested by medical professionals to see whether or not they have this virus. Remember, the vast majority of players that are testing positive either have no symptoms at all, meaning they're asymptomatic, or they have very mild symptoms, such that many of these kids would not even know they have the coronavirus unless they were being tested for it. Which means that on a college campus, if you start to feel ill, or even if you're not ill and you start to show a fever or you start to get noticed to be sick, you are far more likely to be caught early than you are to become ill beforehand. So if you're living at home in an apartment or a condo or a house with your family, that's actually been shown to be one of the places that this thing spreads the most, is in settings like that. And you're not surrounded by medical professionals, and you're not being tested on a day-to-day basis to see whether or not you might have the virus. So contrary to arguments that the fear porn purveyors out there want to put out into the atmosphere of, oh my God, what happens if one of these players tests positive and ends up hospitalized or ends up dying? It's an awful story. But it isn't actually the case that they're under more danger of that happening on a college campus than they would be of it happening off a college campus. The reason why you hear about positive test cases now is because the kids are on campus and they're being tested regularly. You didn't hear about that when they were living at home. If one of them got sick, it typically didn't make the news. So the best place these guys can be from a health perspective is probably on campus. So the argument of, oh my God, what if the worst case scenario happens associated with college football? And by the way, this could be for any sport, NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, MLS, NHL, all of these players are receiving better medical treatment and better medical care on campuses or with their pro sports teams than they would be if they were living by themselves on their own. And that is a really big fact here that isn't talked about. And people say all the time, well, what happens if they get sick, hospitalized, or die because they're playing a sport? Nobody points out, what if they don't get sick because they're playing a sport? In other words, there's no causality here. I've yet to hear anybody explain why a player is under more danger playing a sport than they would be living their ordinary life. Because remember, a lot of these guys, especially college-age kids, are going to be going out socially with friends if they're back home anyway. They're going to be going into gyms and lifting weights or playing pickup basketball games or doing whatever young athletic guys do. You remember when you were 18, 19, or 20 years old, you weren't staying at home all the time. So the danger to me is actually every bit as equal for these guys, which is low off campus as it is on campus. And so this is an important fact. The other one is this: they don't have to play. The Big Ten in their statement made it clear that they would keep everybody on scholarship even if they were not playing football. In other words, if you are afraid of getting sick and you don't want to play, but you're afraid that if you said that, you would have an issue with losing your scholarship, that's not the case. All of these college football players have the option not to play and to still remain on scholarship. Now, I understand the Big Ten commissioner said on the Big Ten Network, we're not necessarily going to have sports in the fall. We may not have sports in the fall, he said. We may not have a college football season. That's possible, but what I don't want to have happen is I don't want for people to panic and suddenly make the decision, oh, we can't play college football based on a flawed logical analysis that is presuming a danger that doesn't necessarily exist. Now, I think the Big Ten jumped the gun a little bit here. The SEC put out a statement saying we're going to continue to wait. Here's another significant factor about college football, okay? I think the smartest thing college football can do is wait until these other sports get back and really get underway playing, right? Because think about this. College football is not going to start until the first week of September. By the first week of September, in theory, we will have had the NHL playing for a month. We will have had the NBA playing for a month. We will have had the NFL already in training camps getting ready as well. We will have had Major League Baseball playing for over a month, and we will have theoretically had the MLS playing for almost 2 months. If all of those sports are off and underway and progressing in some form or fashion, as we would all hope that they would be by August, then you're going to have college football teams going into training camp in August with all of these other pro sports leagues already playing. And so I think that is significant. The other part here that doesn't get enough attention is the economic impact. I told you earlier there were three main reasons that I don't think spring college football works. First, because if you're worried about the virus, it's likely to be worse in cold and flu season in January, February, March, and April than it is in September and October and November when the season's being played. Secondly, a huge percentage of juniors who think they're going to go pro and seniors who plan on going pro are not going to play. So you'd only have about 2.5 classes to play college football in the spring. And on top of that, as if that were not significant enough, you then would require all of these college football players to play for 2 seasons in the space of about 7 months, which is way too much wear and tear to put on their bodies, as Urban Meyer said. So if you're one of these people who's sitting around saying, well, we should just wait, understand that waiting means college football is not going to happen. And if college football doesn't happen, you are going to see a draconian cutback in overall athletic department budgets. Because if there's no college football, that's where all the money to give scholarships to every other athlete comes from. And you've already seen this even at supremely wealthy institutions like Stanford. They've had to cut a ton of different scholarships. So this is something that I feel like is in my wheelhouse. Looking at the data, analyzing it, making intelligent decisions, and not overreacting to the stories of the moment. Make no mistake about this right now. College football is under siege because all these other pro sports leagues have decided to come back. And people out there are going to take a bite of the proverbial apple and say, are they going to play or are they not going to play? And they share these stories that are designed to terrify you out there every single day. Oh my God, look how many people tested positive at X school. Look how many people tested positive at Y school. And the idea with that is to scare you into believing they can't play. The bigger part of the story to me is look at how many people who are testing positive, and none of them that I'm aware of have had to be hospitalized. Not one single college football player so far that I have seen that has been infected on a campus has had to be hospitalized. All of them have either been asymptomatic or had relatively mild cases. And that's a pretty good credit, but that's also reflected in what the data would tell us is occurring nationwide. There is not a major danger to players right now. And again, I want to reemphasize this. There is not a major danger. And also, there's no indication that players are under more danger on a college campus than they would be at home. And so I think actually the data would reflect they're safer on a college campus than they would be if they are somewhere else trying to get treatment or not even aware of what might be going wrong if they're not on a college campus. It's important to think about. When we come back, I'm going to give you some more positivity here. Julian Edelman, I thought, responded brilliantly and beautifully to the latest controversy involving Deshaun Jackson. We're going to play that audio for you at the top of hour two. At the bottom of the hour. And then we're also going to be joined by George Reister to talk about it at the top of hour two. And then in hour three, we got a White House guest. Aaron Perini, who's been on the show before, is going to join us in hour three. White House guest Aaron Perini to talk about all of sports coming back and more. This is OutKick the coverage. I appreciate all of you for hanging out with me. Up next, great clip from Julian Edelman. It's going to make your Friday morning a little bit better. Thanks for hanging with us here on Fox Sports Radio.